Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm Joni Parsons, co-creator of RevelEleven, along with Monica Smith, who is actually off tonight. We started RevelEleven about 4 years ago to have really informative, edgy, and fun events here in Seattle. And then in March, of course, we pivoted online. And since then, we've had more than 80 online events. So some of you are new to our community, and for those of you who are a part of our community, thank you for joining us this evening. So I'm super excited about our conversation tonight. Have any of you ever taken a personality test before? Wondered who you are? I have, I certainly have, and I've done a lot of this. But I have to say that the Enneagram has really nailed me to a T, because I've taken a lot of tests over the years. I took it again last night and I'm still a 7, Raena, I'm still a 7. So I was sharing that information with my partner, Jordan, last night, and we laughed so hard about a couple of the lines in the description because it was so accurate. Now, some of you know me and some of you don't, but I just thought I would read this because this is what we were laughing about. 7 minds are restless and filled with ideas and plans and activities to look forward to. They anticipate the future, virtually licking their lips as they foresee the delicious possibilities that await them. But 7s do not just think about the future. They get out there and actually make it happen. They live their dreams by throwing themselves into action and putting their plans in motion. With their energy and enthusiasm, they get things going. Now, for any of you who know me, that is the perfect description of me. And that's probably, you know, we have the positive side and we have the not so positive side. And Raena kind of laughed when she's like, oh, you're a 7 last night when we were talking. But with that, I'm so pleased to introduce Raena Hubbell, an Enneagram expert, facilitator, and coach. She's been studying this for the last 12 years, and I'm so excited to learn more. So take it away, Raena.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and we'll just dive right in as soon as everyone can see my screen. Oops. Tech difficulties already happening. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Thumbs up? Okay.
Thumbs up.
Great. All right, so yeah, today I am hoping to cover these things. So first of all, just talking about what the Enneagram is, how does it work? And really importantly, how is it different from other systems? Joni kind of touched on this. A lot of people have this experience when they learn about their Enneagram type, where they realize, wow, it's like someone got inside my head and nothing else has really pegged me quite this way. So I'll talk a little bit about how it is different from other systems. I'm going to give you a brief overview of each of the 9 types so you can have a sense for what the types are like. When I go into this system in detail, I actually take a whole day to talk about the 9 Enneagram types. So this is going to be a lightning fast speed round and hopefully spark some curiosity about the system. At the end, I'll give you some recommendations for further exploration if you want to learn more. So starting with what the Enneagram is. So the Enneagram is a system of 9 distinct personality types. And what's interesting about the Enneagram is that it's really describing 9 aspects of the human psyche. So 9 aspects of being a person. And we all have all 9 Enneagrams in us to certain extents. And if you've ever taken an Enneagram test, you'll see that the scores, depending on the test, will reflect, you know, you have more of this type and way less of this type. And what we find is that each individual actually has one type that's dominant. So the one that gets prioritized, and that personality type explains how you're most naturally wired, where you go to most of the time. And so you have one type. Sometimes I hear people say, I'm a 3, 7, 8. Oops, you're one of those. And there are probably reasons that you're relating to all 3 of those. But you have one type. So there are some dynamics of the system that I'll touch on really briefly. You'll see that there are all these lines across the symbol, and actually those do hold meaning. We don't have time to go into depth on what those all mean, but I will touch on kind of what they're pointing to. So really today we're just focusing on what are all these 9 types about. So before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about how it's different from other systems, which I alluded to. So the first is that, like other systems, it describes personality archetypes or temperaments, but it goes a lot deeper by looking at why you're doing what you're doing. So it's a really deep self-exploration if you really get into it, because you start to ask yourself the question, why am I doing what I'm doing? Really, what's the core motive explaining how I'm showing up? So each of these Enneagram types actually has a core motive, and I'll go into that in a little more depth. That's a key differentiator between the other systems. It's also more dynamic than other systems. I sometimes hear from people that other systems aren't that satisfying because they just are an exercise in putting you in a box. So if you've done DISC or Myers-Briggs, they are useful to a certain extent because they articulate this idea that people are different, which is true. And it's always good to remember that we're wired differently. But the Enneagram actually explains how you can be different in different contexts, different at different points in your life, different at work versus at home or with different people. So it's a really dynamic and flexible system. So while you have one type, it's really not an exercise in purely just typology. It's really looking at where do you gravitate to most of the time. And the final piece, which I think is the most important piece, is that it applies the concept of self-awareness to personality. So all of these 9 types are awesome when the person is highly self-aware, and all of them are kind of a pain when the person isn't self-aware. So it's a really key part of discussing personality, how highly functioning we are, how self-aware we are. So I'll go into that and talk about each of the types when they're really at their best versus when they're not doing their best stuff. So just saying a little bit more about how the Enneagram goes into why we do what we do. As I mentioned, each of the Enneagram types has a core motive, and it's something that it feels absolutely essential to be if I'm a person of that personality type. So revisiting the symbol, these are what are called essence qualities. And so essence qualities, this is what they're called in the literature. So if you read a book on the Enneagram, this is what they're called. It's a quality that I feel I absolutely have to be if I'm a person of a given personality type. So for example, if I'm an 8, I want to be strong. That is my priority. I have to be a strong person. If I'm a 1, I'm thinking a lot about being a good person. If I'm a 4, I'm thinking about being a deep person, and on around the circle it goes. Now, this is kind of abstract for people at first, and looking at it, you may have the experience that one really easily jumps out at you, and you may have the experience that they all seem good. I don't know which one is mine that I prioritize the most. But there actually is one quality, and it drives a lot of behavior. So for example, if I'm a 9 and I value peace, I'm going to do a lot of things to get along with people and to harmonize people and maintain harmony and peacefulness in my environment, which is a very different vibe from 8s. So I'll go into this in more depth, how these essence qualities show up, but this is really that answering that question of why we do what we do. It's because we want to be one of these things. And there is one that we prioritize. So another way to think about this is, which one, if you had to give up everything else and you could only pick one, which one would it be? So as you're exploring your Enneagram type, you can think about that question. So another way, as I mentioned, that the system is different is that it's dynamic and flexible. So wherever you are on the circle, and I'm just picking 3 as an example, you'll see that there are lines connecting that type to 4 other types. A lot of Enneagram teachers don't explain this when they first introduce people to the system, but I think it's really important because when you're going around the circle, you might resonate with quite a few of the types, and it's because there are all these different sides to your personality. So if you are a 3, and that's your home base, that's your dominant type, you might actually relate to things that are said about 2s and 4s and 6s and 9s. And there's a slight difference between those types that are connected by lines and the ones that are on the circle. So the ones that are on the circle, this is really the most important thing to talk about, and something that I would be remiss if I didn't talk about in an introduction to the system. So most people have one dominant type and a type adjacent on the circle that they resonate with quite a bit of what's said about that type. So they relate to a lot of it. And that's called a wing type. So for example, you could be a 3 with a 2 wing, meaning that 3 is your dominant type, but you also have a lot of characteristics of type 2. Or you could be a 3 with a 4 wing. So these have to be adjacent. Sometimes I hear people say, I'm a 3 with a 7 wing. Not possible. It has to be right next door. But what's really interesting, and as I get into the types, you'll see this, is that each next door type is opposite the one before it in some way. So 4s are very different from 3s. And when a 3 has a 4 wing, it's a really interesting combination of personality. And this explains how people can seem like a bundle of opposites or contradicting themselves or acting what seems to be out of character. So the wing types are a really big piece of this personality conversation, because the sum total of your personality is your dominant type and your wing type kind of mixed together. So again, if I'm a 7, I can have a 6 wing or I can have an 8 wing. And I think I said this, but most people have one dominant wing type and one wing type that they don't recognize at all. So quite often 7s have an 8 wing and not a 6 wing, for reasons too complicated to go into in this session. But yes, has to be next door and it's always there. Now the line types are types that can show up in certain contexts, particularly when you're really at your best or when you're really not at your best. So if you were a 3, for example, when I talk about type 9, there might actually be aspects of that type that you relate to, and you see it as a pattern that shows up occasionally in your life. Similarly for type 6. So I could spend all day talking about how each of these types integrates pieces of these other types, but I just wanted to acknowledge what those lines mean and the fact that wherever you are, you have access to 5 personality types, essentially. And that's why the system is so rich and complex and dynamic. And as I said, you can really dig deep into the meaning of all of that, but right now we're just going to go around and talk about each of the 9 types. Okay, so the last way that it's different is that it brings the concept of self-awareness in. And the only other personality system that I know of that does this in some way is Strength Finders. Strength Finders, if you don't know, articulates your top strengths, and I think they refer to it as balconies and basements. Basically, what's the upside of this strength and how could this kind of get you into trouble? And that's what the Enneagram does. But in a way, the Enneagram kind of brings it all together in a pattern, in a package that makes sense. So when we talk about these types, there are 3 kind of buckets that relate to how highly functioning a person is. So you can be healthy, really at your best. Life is great. It's working really well. Things are kind of effortless and you're resilient to whatever life is throwing at you. And then there's average, which is I'm kind of engaging in a lot of automatic behaviors, and maybe sometimes I do something kind of reactively and I look back and I think, maybe that wasn't the best way to handle that situation. And then fixated is really when I'm not at my best. And that happens when I'm under a lot of stress. So what pushes us down the levels, so to speak, is stress. And that could be temporary stress. It could be that I didn't sleep very well last night. It could be that there's a pandemic going on. There are all sorts of stresses that can push us down the levels. And it's natural. It's just part of being a human. And it's how we're designed to cope. But what brings us up the levels is awareness. And when I say awareness, I'm not talking about, oh, I'm aware that I'm nitpicky, or, oh, I'm aware that I'm blunt. It's noticing things that aren't producing the outcomes that you want, like noticing your problematic tendencies and choosing to do something different. So noticing it and shifting into something that is more productive, that has better outcomes for you. So as a kind of shorthand, I'll draw a line between healthy and average/fixated. And I'm going to talk about each of the types above this line, so to speak, and below the line, so to speak. Now, if you have come across the Enneagram before, particularly in social media or on the internet, you'll know that there are lots of stereotypes about the different Enneagram types. And the Enneagram is so much more than a set of stereotypes. It's so much deeper than that. And it really helps you understand what each person or what people of each Enneagram type is really going for. So it's a really powerful tool for cultivating empathy, because you can start to understand, here's where that behavior is coming from. And maybe they're not expressing it in a way that is really productive, but this is what they're actually trying to accomplish. So there are stereotypes, and what's actually true about the stereotypes is that they're reasonably accurate below the line. And the reason for that is that when we go below the line, when we're operating kind of from this autopilot mode or from a fixated place, our personalities are really predictable. It's almost like there's an operating system and it's just kind of running, and we're not bringing a lot of awareness to things. And when we're there, we are really predictable, and we are prone to behaviors that could be accurately described by these stereotypes. But those stereotypes are not true at all above the line. So what I'm actually going to do is talk first about what the stereotypes about each of the types are, and then contrast that with what the type looks like when the person is really at their best. So when they're healthy. And as I said, the stereotypes do not hold true when a person is highly self-aware. So looking at stereotypes versus the essence of the type, what they're really going for. And again, the essence is that core motive. So if I'm a 7, for example, I always have access to joy, but there's a way that my personality is going to start chasing joy and trying to manufacture joy. And our personalities are always trying to help us get to this place where we feel our essence. So whatever type we are, it's trying to help us, but there's a way that when we lose self-awareness, it's actually pretty counterproductive, and it's accomplishing kind of the opposite of what we're looking for. So again, I'm going to talk about each type, starting with the stereotype, and then looking at what the type looks like when they're highly functioning. So I'm just going to take a quick drink of water before I go into type 8. So I start with type 8 for a number of reasons that are too complicated to go into in this session, but one good reason is that 8s are pretty easy to recognize. So 8s are, again, all about strength. If I'm an 8, it's crucial to be strong. So the stereotype about 8s, again, we're starting with the stereotypes, is that 8s are the boss. And this is actually something that some Enneagram authors call 8s. They actually name them the boss. And as a quick aside, you'll hear me referencing the types by their numbers, which can be confusing for people who are new to the system. But the reason is that the purest way to refer to every Enneagram type is by their number. Now, different authors have different names for the different numbers. So if you were to Google around, you would see different names associated with them. The names that I use to describe them at their healthy levels is the set of names that the founders of the Enneagram Institute came up with, and they are really good at respecting all of the types. So a lot of authors have biases about the types, like there are some that they just don't really like, but the founders of the Enneagram Institute are really respectful of all the types, and all the names that they came up with are pointing to a gift of the type. So I'm going to contrast that with stereotypical names that sometimes do end up being used by authors. So you might see 8s referred to as the boss. Now, if I'm an 8, and this is again at an average or fixated level, I want to be the boss. And that could be in a professional context, that could be in a personal context. I want to be the boss of my family. I want to be the boss of my friends. I like to be in control if I'm an 8. So I'll be a highly assertive personality type. Like, I don't really beat around the bush. I'm going to tell you exactly where I stand. And by the way, I would prefer if you tell me where you stand too. I actually really want people to be direct with me, and I don't understand why they're not. But I bring this immense amount of energy and strength of conviction and kind of a boldness that can intimidate other people. So even though I want people to be direct with me, because I'm intimidating to other people, they back down. And this is something that I'll experience a lot if I'm an 8. There's a feeling like people can't really meet my energy. And they're not really standing up to me or taking a stand or challenging me in any way. And really what I want is for them to challenge me or to be direct with me. So that's one of the key qualities of 8s. Like, there's nothing that an 8 won't say, especially below the line. And it doesn't matter how important of a person you are. It doesn't matter whether you're my boss or my colleague or my kid. I'm going to be pretty consistent in all of my interactions because I'm just not intimidated by people. And I like to get shit done, and I will use language. Language stronger than that, especially below the line. Most 8s will use a little bit of language because I'm a strong person, and I'm kind of also testing you when I'm at this level, I'm testing how strong you are. So I'll drop language and kind of see, oh, did you flinch? You're not that strong, are you? You're not going to stand up to me. So I'm also kind of reading other people's energy if I'm an 8. And I am making things happen. I'm all about making an impact, moving forward with momentum, getting things done, accomplishing more. There's this feeling like I want more, whatever more is. It could be one more run on the ski mountain or one more chapter in the book we're writing, but I always want more. And I am going to be really determined. Like, I do not back down if I'm an 8. And I love it when people tell me that something can't be done, because I will show you it can be done. So there's this conviction that goes with 8s. And this is actually true of 8s at all levels. Something I really admire is that they will push through. Like, this is a feeling that 8s have, and on a team or in a context where there are challenges coming up, 8s stand their ground and they'll face them with courage. And so they're also going to be really resourceful because they're going to figure out how to face the challenge. And there's also kind of, I love this word unapologetic, because that's kind of how it is. If I'm an 8, this is how I am. If you don't like it, that's fine. So that's what it looks like in the stereotypical form, so the most recognizable form that you'll see. But when 8s are at their best, they're not operating as the boss, they're operating as the challenger. So if I'm highly functioning as an 8, I'm still bringing that desire to challenge people and to be challenged and to conquer challenges, but there's a way that I'm doing it where I'm not pushing people around or kind of bowling people over. That's something that happens below the line. So when I'm highly functioning as an 8, I'm going to be courageous. It's not that I'm never afraid, it's that I'll face things that I'm afraid of. I will be bold. I have this big energy, and I can always bring more energy. By the way, something that 8s are often told is that they're too much. And it's a message that they'll get growing up. And especially, I really should say this. There are no types that are disproportionately men versus women. It's an even distribution. So often people will say, oh, so 8s are men and 2s are women. Not at all true. It's that they're socialized differently. So especially female 8s and female leaders who are 8s will get this feedback that they need to tone it down, especially below the line. And the feeling that 8s will have is, this is toned down. Like, I am toning it down. So anyway, that aside, at this level, I'm going to have a natural confidence because I just believe that I can do whatever I set my mind to. And people will find that charismatic. It's not that I'm trying to dazzle people at all. It's just that I have this natural confidence that people find inspiring and that they want to follow. So 8s make natural leaders. People of any Enneagram type can be a great leader, but there are certain types that are just more drawn to it. And because 8s like to be in control, they are drawn to leadership. And there's a way that I also am empowering to other people. Like, I want other people to feel their strength. So I'm really supportive of other people. I like to mentor them, and I like to challenge them. So that's type 8. Again, above the line, at my best as an 8, I'm a challenger. Below the line, the stereotype is that I'm the boss. And it all ties back into being a strong person. Like the primary way that I feel my strength if I'm an 8 is taking on those challenges and pushing through and making things happen. So that's type 8. Now next door, something very, very different. 9s are all about peace. That's the essence quality of type 9. So I cherish the feeling of calm and stability and peacefulness and harmony. And below the line, when I'm at an average or fixated level, the stereotype is that I'm the accommodator. I am so easy to get along with because I love peace, and peace equals harmony below the line. There's no way to have peace with any kind of conflict. So I'm going to be really agreeable with people. I'm going to be super easygoing. One way to recognize 9s is that 9s are the people who can get along with pretty much anyone because they're really receptive to other people. But what I'm doing below the line here is I'm avoiding conflict because it just doesn't feel worth it and it feels kind of hard and uncomfortable. So I'm gonna take the path of least resistance and just take the easy way out. So if I need to have a hard conversation, you know, maybe that person will figure it out on their own, or maybe someone else will tell them. It's not a big deal. It's fine. So I'll talk myself out of addressing issues that I need to address. And I really try to get on board with other people. That's what the word merging, what that's pointing to is that usually when we're making a decision, my first question is going to be, well, what do you want to do? And the reason I'm doing that is that I'm trying to figure out if I can get on board with it. Because if I disagree, then that could lead to conflict. So I'm also going to kind of ignore my own needs, and I'm just really accommodating to other people. So I'm letting go what I care about, and I'm having a hard time at this level asserting boundaries. Like saying no is really hard because what if the person's upset? And that's what I'm really avoiding down here. I really don't want anyone to be upset or anyone to be in conflict with me or with each other. So I'll also harmonize other people's relationships. And there's a way that I'll also kind of put off tasks that feel really hard. So I have a 9 wing. I always put off doing my taxes because the feeling is, oh, that's going to be so unpleasant. Let's do that later. And also have habits because I like to feel comfortable, especially at this level. So that's really different from how 9s look when they're highly functioning. 9s above the line can hold their ground and can assert boundaries. Another stereotype about 9s is that they can be kind of a doormat, like people walk all over them. That only happens at really low levels for 9s. And above the line, I'm still bringing this receptivity to other people. I'm really tolerant of people and accepting of them. I'm a really good listener. If I'm a 9, really at all levels, I'm really good at listening to people. And one of the things that I'm really good at is putting myself in other people's shoes and understanding their perspective and where they might be coming from. So 9s are highly empathetic to the point of actually feeling other people's feelings, like actually feeling them. And also, they have this ability to synthesize different perspectives, so kind of bring together differing points of view. Below the line, 9s want consensus. Like it would just be so nice if we could all agree. But above the line, they realize that it's not actually about consensus, it's about synthesizing things. And also 9s are extremely patient. So probably the most patient of all the Enneagram types. Now, I'm going to talk about another type that is really nice and good with people. Like 9s are nice and good with people, but there's a key difference between them. And what I'll say here now is that if I'm a 9, I don't really care that much if you like me. I just don't want you to be mad at me. So there's another type that wants to be liked, but can look similar to this type. So if you're thinking you might be this type, or the other type I'm referring to is type 2, looking at those two, ask yourself, do I just want everyone to get along, or do I want to cultivate relationships where people like me? So that's a key difference. So again, above the line, I'm the peacemaker. Below the line, I'm accommodating everyone. and I'm not holding boundaries. And all of this behavior makes sense when you realize that 9s are all about peace, and they just cherish that feeling. Okay, so moving right along, type 1, about something totally different. The essence quality for 1s is goodness. And what that means is if I'm a 1, I think a lot about what it means to be a good person. So I think about morality and ethics and what the right thing to do is, and I care about doing things the right way, and I can see the potential in things. Now, below the line, and this is another name that some authors do use, I'm the perfectionist. So of all the Enneagram types, 1s are the most prone to perfectionism. There's one other type that can do it, but they don't really get labeled as the perfectionist. And the reason that I'm a perfectionist below the line as a 1 is that I'm trying so hard to be a good person. And when I go below the line as a 1, I start to conflate goodness with perfection. So not only do I have to be a good person, but I have to be perfect. I can't make any mistakes. So I'm going to have really high standards, and I'm going to be very meticulous because I don't want to make a mistake, and I want to make sure everything is perfectly right. And I do this purely because of the satisfaction of making it as good as it possibly can be. There's not really an outcome that I'm looking for. It's just that it feels good to tie the bow on something that's perfect. So I'm going to be really self-disciplined because I think I should be, because that's what good people are. They're responsible and self-disciplined. And I think a lot about should. The word should pops up for me a lot. I should be this way and other people should do this, and you shouldn't speed and you should vote. Like, I'll have a lot of shoulds, and that will cause me to be kind of judgmental because I have all these expectations and principles that I think make a good person, and I'm kind of measuring people against that. So I'll feel kind of frustrated that things aren't as they should be. And I'll be pretty rigid about my point of view. I'm really committed to the idea that I'm right about the way that things should be. And I'm also, because I'm measuring things against a standard of perfection, which, by the way, some 1s can't cop to being perfectionists, but they'll say, well, I have really high standards. So really, it's the standard is perfection. So I'll be critical and self-critical below the line because I'm measuring things against a standard of perfection. Now, it looks totally different above the line. 1s above the line are thinking about the potential in things and how good they could be, what the highest expression of a certain person or a certain thing could be. And that could be myself. What is my highest potential? It could be an organization. It could be a PowerPoint deck. So there are lots of things that you can fill in the blanks with, but I'm thinking about the potential, and I'm patient with the process of making it better. So the reason that 1s are called the reformer when we're talking about the highly functioning version is that 1s are naturally drawn to improving things. It's just yummy to me to make things better because I can see how good they could be. So I'm just naturally moved to lift them up. And there's a key difference. Below the line, it's should, and above the line, it's could. And I find that inspiring if I'm a 1. So I'm not frustrated that things aren't the way I think they could be. I just want to get in there and make it better. So I'm discerning in the sense that I can tell what actually matters and what doesn't matter. I can discern whether something can be 80-20 versus 100. And I already mentioned this, 1s of all levels are really thinking a lot about principles and ethics and morality. So let's see, high integrity. 8s also really prize integrity, but for 1s, it kind of fits in this framework of what it means to be a good person. So again, above the line, I'm the reformer, and below the line, I'm slipping into some perfectionistic tendencies. And it all comes back to goodness. That's where it comes from. So type 2, very different type, all about the essence quality of love. So if I'm a 2, it's all about connection. In the workplace, it's more liking. And I'm all about building relationships, and I'm really focused on other people. So when I'm below the line, the stereotype is that I'm a people pleaser. I really want to win people over. There's a feeling like to build these connections, I have to win you over. I have to do things for you to get you to like me or to get you to love me. So I'm naturally very friendly. I'm warm. I'm encouraging. I like to give to people, to be of service to other people. And the reason that I'm of service to other people is because I'm trying to win them over at this level. Below the line, I'm trying to win people over. So I feel like I have to do things for them to win them over. I'm going to put a lot of focus on other people, so I forget myself very quickly. It's all about other people's needs, and I don't have any needs of my own. So I'll also be really tuned into what's going on with other people in a different way than nines. Nines are measuring how other people are doing with regard to whether they're upset. That's really the only thing I'm watching for if I'm a nine. For twos, they're kind of scanning for what you might need. So they pay a ton of attention, use a lot of eye contact. And the experience that other people can have is actually that if they're talking to a two, the two is kind of reading their mind, and that can feel kind of invasive. So when we say overbearing, it's really pointing to that element, to how twos can show up below the line. And they're highly intuitive. Sometimes they know what's going on with another person better than that person knows themselves. So above the line, a key difference is that I am showing up as who I really am, and I don't have to win you over. So there's no feeling like I have to earn your affection or your care or your liking. I'm just me. And the name The Helper is pointing to the fact that twos at all levels are naturally generous. The question is whether, I mean, above the line, one of the differentiators down at the bottom, you'll see giving and receiving. Above the line, I can acknowledge that I have needs too, and I can receive help from other people. Below the line, I cannot ask anyone for help, and I really would prefer you not help me because I'm the helper. But above the line, I can give and receive. So I'll also be kind, caring, affectionate. I express how I feel about other people. Where appropriate, I might use touch to be reassuring. And I'm really encouraging of other people. I kind of champion other people. And I have a really big part of my personality organized around supporting other people. And two key words here, sincere and independent. So below the line, if I'm a two, I can have some codependent tendencies. Like I don't really know who I am separate from other people. But above the line, I can spend time alone. I can enjoy what I enjoy. And I know who I am. And I'm showing up authentically. So that sincerity comes from, I'm offering my service and my giving in a way that just feels really good to me. And I'm not doing it to win you over, and I'm showing up as the real me. So again, above the line, I'm the helper. The stereotype about twos that's reasonably accurate below the line is being a people pleaser, trying to win people over. And it all comes from the pursuit of love, which again, in the workplace is more like liking. All right. So type 3, next door, all about value. And if you've read any Enneagram books, a lot of the literature refers to the essence quality of type 3 as glory. Some 3s really resonate with glory and some 3s really don't. So when we talk about value, it's about being of value, contributing value, being valued by other people. There are 3 types that think a lot about how they're being perceived. And if I'm a 3, I'm paying a lot of attention to whether people are perceiving me as valuable. That's what I'm all about. So below the line, the stereotype about 3s is that they're the champ. So I'm a winner if I'm a 3 below the line. So I'm all about success. This is how I feel my value below the line. And I'm highly ambitious. I want to climb the ladder. I'm extremely goal-oriented. So I always have goals. I'll have professional goals and I'll have personal goals, and I know exactly what I'm going to do to get to each milestone. And I track the metrics and I measure where I am with regard to where I'm trying to go. And this is something I really admire about 3s. They don't just sit around waiting for their dreams to come true. They'll do all the work that it takes. So extremely hardworking. I'll be really adaptable. Like you can drop me into pretty much any situation and I'll figure out how to succeed. And the word charming, when I'm below the line as a 3, I'm trying to charm you. I'm trying to read you for what you will think is admirable. So there's a bit of a feeling like I'm performing. And actually, this is true for all of the types that think a lot about how they're being perceived. Below the line, there's kind of a feeling like I'm on display and I'm performing. So I don't think I mentioned this. The other 2 types that think about how they're being perceived are type 2 and type 4. All want to be perceived in very different ways. As a 3, I want to be perceived as a winner below the line. But it's kind of this feeling of having an interview persona. Like everybody has an interview persona where we kind of switch it on. And that's the feeling that I'll have if I'm a 3 below the line, acting as the champ, kind of pervasively. That's a consistent experience for me. So I'm image conscious in the sense that I'm trying to scan for whether people think well of me, whether they're impressed by my accomplishments. And I might draw attention to the things that I've accomplished. And in some ways, this can be really blatant, or it could be, I really want people to notice that I won this trophy, so I'm going to put it right at the entrance so they ask me about it. So different 3s will show up in different ways. And I'm going to be competitive. I am measuring myself against how everybody else is doing. And when I'm acting as the champ, I want to be the best. So I think about that and I compare myself. Now, above the line, I'm the achiever. So I'm naturally wired to be going after goals and accomplishing amazing things. But above the line, I don't need validation from other people. I'm inner directed in the sense that I know who I really am, and I am going after things that matter to me. So I'm authentic with people. I can accept myself. There's kind of this below the line, this drive to always be better and always be progressing and never take a break. So above the line, I can actually take a break and I can accept myself for who I am. So I'll also be just naturally accomplished and successful because of the way that my personality operates. I'm really hardworking. I will be naturally admirable. And I'm genuinely gracious. Below the line, I might know that I need to act gracious, but it's not genuine. Above the line, because I don't need that validation, I'm genuinely gracious. And I'm highly motivating to other people and motivating to myself. So above the line, I'm the achiever. Below the line, I'm acting as the champ. And it all comes from the pursuit of feeling value. Next door, something really different. 4s are all about being a deep person. So the stereotype about 4s is that they are the tortured artists of the world. And when I'm thinking about being a deep person, it's really about finding my meaning and the purpose of my life. And I want to express that and express who I am. So I'll be naturally very creative and artistic, and that can show up in a lot of different ways. One misconception is that other Enneagram types can't be creative. Not true at all. It's just that 4s spend a lot of time introspecting and touching into how they feel about things and what the deeper meaning of things is, and that moves them to create. So their creations feel really personal. They'll be very sensitive about feedback on their creations. And there's a way that I really want to be different if I'm a 4. Like I like to be different. I like to march to the beat of my own drummer. So I'll be kind of cultivating uniqueness. And I'll be identified with the idea that I'm misunderstood and nobody gets me. And I'll spend a lot of time kind of in a moody state because I feel like nobody gets me. And these deeper parts of me, no one could ever understand. Now, above the line, I am still naturally introspective, and there's a way that I can kind of balance out my emotions and I can feel all of them. There's kind of a tilt towards the things that hurt below the line because that feels deeper. But above the line, I have a really high EQ. I can make space for other people's emotions. I can stay in the conversation. A lot of other Enneagram types shut down certain emotions, but 4s are willing to feel all of them. And that's one of the ways that they feel their depth. So I'll still be creative. I'll have a really active imagination because I can, dream up all of these different things. I'm genuine. So below the line, there's actually kind of a lack of authenticity, even though that's what I'm all about when I'm trying to cultivate this uniqueness. But above the line, I'm honest with myself and I'm an individual. So I probably will still be an artist, but there's a way that I'm not feeling that kind of tortured side. So above the line, I'm the individualist, and below the line, I'm the tortured artist. That's the stereotype. And it's all about this feeling of depth. So next door, wisdom, type 5. Now, the stereotype about 5s is that they are Spock. Highly, highly logical, very rational. A lot of 5s kind of talk in a certain way that's highly rational, and these are the facts, and that's purely the objective logical truth. So they'll be really knowledgeable because they're all about wisdom. So they spend a lot of their time acquiring knowledge. They love to dig into things and understand them all the way through. So if I'm a 5, I kind of like to hang back. I don't like to be in the middle of things. Like at a party, I'll kind of stand around the edges. And when people say, hey, come over, I actually don't want that. I want to stay back. And other people can experience me as aloof because I spend a lot of time up in my head thinking about things, because I'm all about wisdom. I'm all about knowledge. So I'm up in my head kind of playing with these mental worlds, and I start to forget about other people. And actually, I really just want other people to leave me alone. And I'll be really unsentimental because I'm highly logical and I just don't really understand feelings. It's not that I don't feel feelings, I just don't know what to do with them. And very reclusive and detached. Again, I just want other people to leave me alone so that I can go spend my time learning about things and digging into them. Now, above the line, 5s can be with other people and they can be highly social, actually. So above the line, 5s are more the investigator. And what this is pointing to is that 5s just have this natural curiosity about the world and the universe and all sorts of things. So they're fascinated with how things work. A lot of engineers and scientists and people who are pushing out the boundaries of science and technology are 5s. And it's because it's just satisfying to learn about things. And something 5s have to watch out for is just leaving it at that. Like, I just want to learn about it and not do anything with this information. But above the line, they'll apply their knowledge in a way that makes an impact. And so they'll also be really insightful because they do kind of hang back and gather all of these data points. And they'll be really thorough because they just want to understand everything there is to know about a topic that's interesting to them. So again, this is all about wisdom. And above the line, 5s do not look like Spock. But below the line, that's what starts to happen. So coming back to wisdom. Now, 6s, on the other hand, are all about security. And what that means is making sure that nothing goes wrong, that the future is safe, that we're going to be okay. Now, below the line, how that shows up is that I worry a lot. I'm thinking about all the things that could happen and all the possible scenarios, and oh my gosh, something is going to go wrong. So we better make sure that we have a plan for that and that we're prepared. And I'm probably scanning the rooms that I walk into even. I've heard 6s say this, like, oh yeah, when I came in, I definitely checked for where the windows were and where the fire extinguisher was. So below the line, I'm vigilant. I'm like scanning for what could go wrong, and I'm anticipating what could go wrong. And because of this, I get kind of worked up and anxious, and I worry about these things because I'm spending all my time thinking about all these worst case scenarios. So I'm going to be really good at problem solving because that's kind of what I'm doing in my head all the time when I'm anticipating things. And what's interesting is that 6s are usually the coolest heads in a crisis. Often because they've already thought of it and they knew that this was coming and they had a plan. But they're really good at navigating things. So below the line, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions because I'm not sure that I can trust things. And my favorite question is, what if? And I'll also ask questions like, well, have you really thought this through? And what I really mean is, I don't think you've really thought this through, but the way that I can pose those questions can be kind of annoying to other people when they don't understand where it's coming from. What it's coming from is a positive intention. I'm trying to make sure that nothing goes wrong. But I will have a tendency to point out the problems with ideas. And when people don't understand where that's coming from, it feels, other people experience it as pessimistic or naysaying. So I doubt a lot of things. Below the line, I really don't trust many things, including myself. I don't really trust myself. So I'm probably going to shop for opinions, and I'm going to overanalyze things, and I'm going to have a really hard time making a decision, because when I pull the trigger, then something could go wrong. So yeah, I'm doubting myself and I'm doubting other people, and I'm pretty skeptical. Like, I won't trust things at face value. And when it comes to relationships, I don't trust people right off the bat. They have to earn their trust with me. But once you're in, you're really in. And this leads into the high side of type 6, which is the loyalist. And what this is pointing to is that 6s are highly relationship oriented. It's a way of creating a sense of security. If I have really trusting, strong relationships and people are loyal and reliable, then I can lean on them if I need to. So there are a few ways that 6s go about creating a sense of security for themselves. And one of them is this relationship side, and that's why they're called the loyalists. 6s are extremely loyal and will show up for people when they're needed, because that's how they want to be treated. So very loyal, very reliable, really community oriented. If I'm a 6, I love to be part of a community. I love to feel like I have a support system. So I actually like to be on a team. I like to be part of a group. And some of these words, clairvoyant, often people say, okay, that has an air of mysticism. Really what this is pointing to is that I can kind of see the future if I'm a 6, because I've spent my whole life anticipating all the things that could happen. So I'm pretty good at seeing what's going to happen, and I'm really good at strategizing around that. And above the line, I trust my ability to navigate all the things that could happen. So yes, I'm trustworthy because I want other people to be, and there's kind of a natural humility to 6s. So above the line, I'm the loyalist, and I trust myself. That's really important. And below the line, I'm worrying a lot. And I'm also worrying for other people, because for some reason, other people don't think about all the things that could go wrong. And I'm doing it for them. So I cover the bases for people. And it all comes back to security. That's what I'm trying to create as a 6. Now 7s, the last one here, all about the essence quality of joy. And when I'm below the line, the stereotype is that I am the fun one. I am the life of the party. I bring the joy. So I'll be really excitable and energetic, and I'm outgoing because I want to meet new people. There's a lot in type 7 about having new experiences. Because the mantra of type 7 is really, seize the day, life is short and we got to make the most of it. And below the line, the way that I make the most of life, which is how I try to feel that joy, is I seek a lot of variety. I'm super busy. I'm juggling a lot of things. And when I do that, I kind of get a little scattered. And I'm distracted. And I also easily get bored because I like things to move quickly, because we got a lot to squeeze in here in this short lifetime. And when I get bored, which again, below the line, I easily get bored, I go up into my head and I think about other things. So usually it's about the future. I'm anticipating awesome things that I could do in the future, or, oh, this weekend, my friend is coming into town. That's going to be so great. And I'm gone. So there's a way that I can kind of check out of conversations when I think I know what the other person is going to say. Now, above the line, I am the enthusiast. So I bring this natural enthusiasm for life. And the key difference above the line versus below the line is that I'm actually really present for life. If I'm a 7, even if it's a boring meeting, I'm there and I'm embracing life as it is. And I'm grateful for what life is offering me. So I'm also going to be really adventurous because I love new experiences. I'm going to be spontaneous. One misconception is that all 7s love to bungee jump or jump out of planes. Not true. It can show up in the form of being a foodie or loving to travel, but the common theme is enjoying new experiences. So I'll be playful. I kind of remind people that we can have fun while we're doing this. And I'm naturally optimistic. I love to think about the possibilities, all the things that we could do. I love to brainstorm, and I just have a positive view of the future. Like, I really believe that things are going to be great. So I also really like change because I'm trying to make the most of life. So I am a change agent and I innovate. Like, I think about how things could be different because I want to experience that. So above the line, again, I'm the enthusiast, and below the line, I'm really kind of being the life of the party and being the fun one. And a misconception about sevens, especially with that stereotype, is that sevens aren't deep or can't be serious, which is not true at all. Sevens are actually really deep. It's just that when I'm down there, I don't really want to face things that hurt or things that would feel painful or limiting. So that's another misconception about sevens. So again, it's all about joy if I'm a seven. So coming back to the full circle, that was a lightning round. I've actually never done it that fast. So hopefully you got a pretty good sense of, what these archetypes are really about and what they're going for and how they can show up. And if you're interested to learn more, you may have already taken a test. The Enneagram assessment on the Enneagram Institute's website is a really great test. I personally think that it's the best test. It's $12, and it gives you a readout of each type and basically how much of each type you have in yourself. And it gives you a PDF that you can read about the types that you scored the highest on. Often the test results are kind of ambiguous, and you might feel like, oh, wow, I resonate with 2 or 3 of these. So you could discuss it with someone who can help you understand the nuances and the differences between the types. That's something I do, but there are other people who do it as well. Riso and Hudson are the co-founders of the Enneagram Institute, and they have a lot of really great books. There are other authors that are good, but there is also a lot of information out there that's biased or uses those names like the boss or the perfectionist. So I find that Riso and Hudson are the most respectful and empathetic with all the types. I also have an e-course on my website that's 3 hours that really gets deeper into each of these types. So I only was able to spend 3 or 4 minutes on each type. The lesson on each type in the e-course is about 15 minutes long, and it has some skits and videos and stuff. So that's available on that website. And you can invite other people to get into it with you. It's actually really fun to do with your partner or with your family or your friends. You actually end up learning a lot about each other, even if you've known each other for 10 to 15 years or more. A lot of the time people will say, there were just some things that I never really got about this person, and now it makes sense. So those are my suggestions for getting a little bit deeper into it. And with that, I will open it up for Q&A. I realize that we're pretty close to the end here, but anyone who wants to stick around and ask any questions, I'll hang around for a little bit.
Raena, thank you so much. That was a fire round, and that was so fun and so enjoyable. So thank you so much. So we do have a question about what is below the line for type 9?
Yeah, so below the line for type 9, 9s are the peacemaker. And what happens below the line is that I start to accommodate and sacrifice what I really want. And there's actually a way that I will convince myself that I don't want something. So I'm kind of repressing what I really want and any emotions that feel unpleasant. But the main thing is that I'm accommodating other people. So I have a really hard time asserting boundaries or, saying what I really want.
And then, Raena, can you talk about how you determine what your wing is? I mean, I know that you said that it's the number on either side, but do you just read those and try to understand which one resonates most with you, or how do you determine that?
Yeah, so if you take the Enneagram assessment, the Ready, you can read the descriptions of the types you score the highest on. Interestingly enough, sometimes people don't score that high on their wing type. So what I would say is first figure out what your dominant type is, and then learn about the types on either side. And you can actually figure out your type totally subjectively just by reading the description and seeing if you resonate with it. So I would just say you figure out dominant type and then look at the types on either side and see if it resonates with you.
I'm definitely going to do that tonight. That's part of my list of things to do. So somebody asked, how can 5 start being more active in using their information to the world?
That's a great question.
Question.
Yeah, so it takes coming out of their heads. So below the line, I'm spending a lot of time up in my head, and I really don't want other people to bother me. And I'm just kind of tinkering around with things and experimenting with things and learning. But when I am highly functioning, if I'm more self-aware, I'm thinking about how do I apply this in a way that makes an impact? And I'm wondering if I should say this. There's a line between 5 and 8. And so when 5s are really at their best, they pick up some of the traits of type 8 and make things happen with the information that they have. So that's a pretty...
And that's a positive thing, right?
Yes. Yeah, because there's a way that 5s can get really into a niche subject that really has no practical application, but they just want to learn about it. And they could spend all their time just learning. So it takes kind of coming up level for 5s to realize, okay, I should probably do something with this information.
Okay, so a couple more things. I know we're over, but this is so fun. So Alexa wanted to know, can you have 2 wings or just one? I think you mentioned that one usually resonates more than the other. Is that right?
Yeah, so most people have one dominant wing. That being said, some people have no wings, which is pretty rare. And some people do have both wings. Usually there's one that's stronger. And usually it has to do with how you were raised and what was really brought out of you. And sometimes the one that's not dominant, it feels like if I were that way, it would get in the way of what I want. So like 8s, for example, can have a 9 wing, but often don't, because the feeling is, well, I won't be strong if I'm accommodating to other people or if I'm receptive to other people. So there's a way that sometimes one of them gets shut down. But yeah, people can have both wings.
Okay, I just have to ask this question because I think it's so great. So it says, I feel like I have multiple personality disorder because I have traits of each type depending on where I am and who I'm with. So at work, must be boss, peacemaker liked. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, so there are certain types that are prone to saying things like that.
And who is that? 9.
So 3s, 6s, and 9s. So I'll touch on this quickly. 9s relate to everything because that's how their personality is wired, is to understand how, I could see how I could be that way. So often 9s will score really ambiguously in tests. My mom is a 9 and she scored evenly in every single type. 6s,
oh, interesting.
So 6s kind of doubt everything and often kind of back into their type. So that's how 6s struggle with it. And then 3s are really adaptable. So they can bring out whatever they need to given the situation. So 3 might be home base for that person because 3s can kind of put on different hats and bring different sides of themselves.
So I would really encourage you to take the test because it's so interesting to see your dominant type and then the types underneath it as well. I mean, that was really interesting to me last night when I took it again. So it's $12 and I think it's well worth the cost, and it's really fun as well. And with that, Raena, I want to thank you so much. That was such a fun evening. And I've already been asking my friends, like, what are you? Have you taken the test? So thank you very much for joining us. And we hope that if you have further questions that you'll reach out to Raena.